Let's talk about something really fundamental. How do we actually know that what we know is real? It's a huge question, right? Well, today we're diving into an ancient system designed to answer exactly that. It's called Hetuvidya, a science of logic from ancient India that is, you'll see, more relevant now than ever.
I mean, think about it. You see a tree, you know it's a tree. Simple. But what if you're dreaming? Or maybe you're looking at an incredibly realistic photo or video that's been altered. In a world that's just swimming in information and misinformation, you really need a solid framework for telling the difference.
So this isn't just some abstract, dusty philosophy. Hetuvidya is a practical toolkit for clear thinking. It comes from the Yogacara school, and you can find it laid out in texts like the Yogacara Bhumi Shastra. It was basically designed to help people cut through all the mental clutter, build solid arguments, and get to a correct understanding of how things really are. You can almost think of it as a blueprint for how to use your mind.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to look at the big framework for any kind of logical debate. They call it the 7 pillars. Then, we'll get into the actual tools you use to prove a point, the 8 methods of proof. We're going to zoom in on the 2 big ones, direct perception and inference. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by connecting this ancient wisdom to our world today.
All right, let's start with the foundation. According to Hetuvidya, a good argument isn't just people shouting opinions at each other. No, it's a structured process, and it's built on 7 key pillars that make sure everything is clear and has a real purpose.
And this framework is just so thorough. It shows that having a good argument is about way more than just having facts. You have to understand the nature of the talk. Are we here to learn, or are we just trying to win? You got to think about the venue. Who are you even talking to? You need a solid basis, like what facts do we all agree on to start with? It even covers things like the adornments, speaking clearly and confidently. And super important, it lays out the points of defeat and even how to back out of a debate gracefully. It's a whole system for having a smart conversation.
Okay, so you've got the framework set up. Now, how do you actually make your point? For that, we need to open up the logical toolbox. Hetuvidya gives us 8 specific methods to establish something as true. So here they are, the 8 tools. You start with your main point, your thesis. You give a reason for it, and maybe use an analogy to explain it. You back it up by showing what it's similar to, that's homology. And what it's not like, that's heterology. But the last 3 are the real foundation of all knowledge: direct perception, inference, and valid testimony. For today, we're really going to focus on the first 2 because they're at the very heart of how we as individuals figure out what's going on in the world.
So let's start with the most direct way of knowing anything, pratyaksha, or direct perception. This is the raw data that comes in through your senses. It's seeing a red apple, hearing a bell ring, feeling the sun on your skin. It's the knowledge that hits you instantly, with no mental filter, no interpretation. It just is. But here's the catch. For a perception to count as a valid pratyaksha, it can't just be any old thing you see or hear. It has to be pure. The system has these 3 really strict conditions that have to be met before you can say, yep, this is true, foundational knowledge. Let's break that down. First, whatever you're perceiving has to actually be there, in front of you. Second, it has to be happening right now, not something you're just remembering or imagining for the future. And third, and this is the tricky one, your perception can't be mistaken or diluted. This is the condition that really separates seeing clearly from just seeing an illusion. So that begs the question, right? What exactly is a diluted state? How do you even know if your senses are playing tricks on you? Well, the ancient scholars were all over this. They systematically identified the most common ways our own perception can fool us.
I mean, look at these classic examples. They're so great because they're completely universal. Mistaking a spinning torch for a solid circle of fire, or thinking the trees on the shore are rushing past when you're on a boat. We've all experienced something like that. It just goes to show you that pure, unfiltered direct perception is actually a really high bar to clear. Our senses, as much as we trust them, are surprisingly easy to trick.
So, if our direct perception can sometimes be flawed, how do we build up our knowledge about the world? Well, that brings us to our second powerhouse method of knowing, anumana, or inference. This is the amazing ability of our minds to go beyond the immediate data and make a logical leap.
Inference is really just about connecting the dots. It's what lets us understand things that we can't see or hear or touch right now. You take a piece of evidence that you do know through direct perception, and then you use logic to figure something out. Honestly, this is how most of our scientific, historical, and even just our everyday knowledge is built.
This right here is probably the most famous example of inference in all of Eastern philosophy, and it's just perfect. You don't see the fire directly, but what you do see is the smoke. That's your pratyaksha, your direct perception. And because you already know from past experience that smoke and fire go together, you make that logical leap. That's anumana. And you conclude there must be a fire. It's so simple, so elegant, and so powerful.
So let's put them side by side to make it really clear. Pratyaksha is the raw data, the what is, happening right now. It's the foundation of facts. Anumana is what processes that raw data to build a bigger picture. It's the extension of knowledge. It lets us understand the past, guess at the future, and see how complex systems work. You absolutely need both of these to get by in the world.
And the system gets even more detailed, breaking inference down into different types. You can infer something by a sign, like seeing a banner and knowing there's a chariot. You can infer by action, like hearing a horse neigh and knowing a horse is nearby. You can even infer by cause and effect, like seeing someone practicing diligently and inferring they'll achieve their goal. Each one is a different logical pathway to understanding things you can't directly see.
Okay, let's bring this all back home. Why on earth does a logical system that's over 1,500 years old still matter? Well, because we are living in an age of total information overload. We're constantly getting hit with what looks like direct evidence, photos, videos, along with a tidal wave of arguments and inferences. This ancient framework is basically a survival guide for making sense of it all.
So here's the real takeaway. True wisdom isn't about picking one way of knowing and sticking to it. It's about learning how to balance them skillfully. It's about knowing when to trust what you see with your own eyes and also knowing when your eyes might be fooling you. It's knowing when an inference makes perfect logical sense and when it's just a wild guess. It's about being critical of both your perceptions and your conclusions.
And that leaves us with one final question to think about. In our world of deepfakes, perfectly curated social media feeds, and incredibly complex global issues, where should we place our trust? Should we trust the seemingly undeniable evidence of our own senses? Or should we trust the careful, disciplined process of a logical argument? As Hechovidya teaches us, the answer probably lies in a very, very careful and conscious both.